The autumn morning in Portland, Maine, carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves as antique appraiser Sarah Mitchell stepped into the Victorian home on Elm Street. The Whitmore estate sale had drawn collectors from across New England, but Sarah's trained eye immediately focused on a small collection of photographs displayed on an ornate mahogany table. Among the sepia-toned portraits and family gatherings, one particular photograph caught her attention. It was a formal studio portrait from 1914, featuring a well-dressed family of four, a stern-looking father in a dark suit, a woman in an elegant white blouse with her hair pinned in the Gibson girl style, and two young children, a boy of perhaps 8 and a girl no older than 5. The photograph bore the embossed mark of Hartwell Studios, Boston, indicating it was taken at one of the city's most prestigious photography establishments. The family appeared prosperous, their clothing suggesting upper-middle-class status during the pre-war era. Sarah lifted the silver frame, examining the image more closely. The composition was typical of the period. The father standing behind his seated wife, children positioned formally beside them. Yet something about the mother's posture seemed unusual. While the rest of the family gazed directly at the camera with the expected stoic expressions of the time, the woman's left hand was positioned oddly, her fingers curved as if concealing something. "Interesting piece, isn't it?" came a voice behind her. An elderly woman approached, introducing herself as Margaret Whitmore, the great-granddaughter of the home's original owners. "Do you know anything about this family?" Sarah asked, her professional curiosity piqued. Margaret shook her head. "That photograph came with some other items we inherited. I believe it belonged to a family named Patterson. Beyond that, I'm afraid I know nothing about their story." Sarah studied the image once more, that peculiar positioning of the mother's hand nagging at her instincts. Back in her downtown Portland office, Sarah placed the photograph under her professional magnifying equipment. Years of appraising antiques had taught her that the most valuable discoveries often lay in the smallest details that others overlooked. As she adjusted the focus and lighting, the image became startlingly clear. The father's mustache was perfectly waxed, the children's clothes pressed and spotless. But it was the mother's hand that drew Sarah's complete attention. Between the woman's fingers, barely visible in the original viewing, was the edge of something white. It appeared to be paper, a small piece, carefully concealed yet not entirely hidden from the camera's lens. The way her fingers curved suggested she was holding it deliberately, perhaps hoping it would go unnoticed in the formal portrait. Sarah's pulse quickened. In her 15 years of appraising historical items, she'd learned that people often hid significant things in plain sight, especially during times of social upheaval or personal crisis. The year 1914 was particularly significant. It marked the beginning of World War I, a time when families across America faced uncertainty and difficult decisions. She photographed the detail with her high-resolution camera and enhanced the image on her computer. The white object became slightly more distinct, appearing to be folded paper, though its contents remained a mystery. Sarah reached for her phone and dialed her colleague, Dr. James Reed, a historian specializing in early 20th century American social history at the University of Southern Maine. "James, I have something that might interest you," she said, her voice containing the excitement she always felt when uncovering a potential historical mystery. "It's a 1914 family portrait, but there's something the mother is hiding in her hand. Something she clearly didn't want others to see, yet couldn't bear to let go of completely." "Send me the images," James replied immediately. 1914 was a pivotal year. Families were dealing with everything from economic uncertainty to the looming war. Whatever she was hiding might tell us a remarkable story. Dr. James Reed examined the high-resolution images Sarah had sent, his historian's mind immediately recognizing the potential significance of the hidden object. The formal nature of studio portraits in 1914 meant that every element was carefully controlled. Nothing appeared by accident. The Hartwell Studios mark is our first real clue. James explained to Sarah during their meeting at the university. Theodore Hartwell ran one of Boston's most exclusive photography studios from 1895 to 1925. His client records, if they still exist, might help us identify this family. James had spent the morning making calls to various Boston historical societies and archives. The Massachusetts Historical Society confirmed they had acquired Hartwell's business records in 1967, including appointment books and client information. "I'm driving to Boston tomorrow," Sarah announced. "This mystery won't solve itself." The next morning, Sarah found herself in the climate-controlled archives of the Massachusetts Historical Society. The Hartwell Studios collection filled 3 large boxes containing appointment ledgers, client correspondence, and photographic plates. She began with a 1914 appointment book, scanning through months of entries. Under March 15th, 1914, she found it. Patterson Family Portrait, 2 p.m. Payment, $12.50, premium sitting. The entry included an address, 145 Beacon Street, Boston. The premium sitting notation suggested this was a wealthy family who could afford Hartwell's most expensive services. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she photographed the entry. The next step would be researching the Patterson family at that address, but she sensed she was on the verge of uncovering something significant. A librarian approached her table. "Finding what you're looking for?" "I think so," Sarah replied. "Now I need to find out who the Pattersons were and what a mother might have felt, compelled to hide in her hand during what should have been a joyful family portrait." The weight of the mystery pressed upon her as she prepared to delve deeper into the Patterson family history. The Boston Public Library's genealogy department became Sarah's next destination. Armed with the address from Hartwell's records, she began piecing together the Patterson family's story through city directories, census records, and newspaper archives. The 1910 census revealed the family's composition. Thomas Patterson, age 42, listed as a textile merchant. His wife Eleanor, age 36, son William, age 8, and daughter Catherine, age 5. The family employed 2 servants, indicating substantial wealth during Boston's textile boom. Thomas Patterson owned Patterson and Associates, a successful textile importing business with connections to mills throughout New England. The company specialized in fine fabrics from European manufacturers, making the Pattersons prominent members of Boston's merchant class. But as Sarah delved deeper into 1914 newspaper archives, she discovered troubling information. The Boston Globe from February 1914 contained a small business section notice. "Patterson and Associates faces difficulties amid changing European trade conditions. More concerning" was an item from the Boston Herald dated March 10th, 1914, just 5 days before the family portrait. Local textile merchant Thomas Patterson questioned by federal investigators regarding suspected irregularities in import documentation. Sarah's heart raced. The family had sat for their expensive portrait while under federal investigation. This context gave new meaning to Eleanor Patterson's hidden object. What had she concealed in her hand during what might have been their final family portrait as a prosperous Boston family? The reference librarian, noticing Sarah's intense focus, approached her table. "Are you researching the Patterson textile scandal?" she asked quietly. Sarah looked up, surprised. "You know about it? It's a fascinating case study." Thomas Patterson was eventually convicted of customs fraud in 1915. The family lost everything: their home, the business, their social standing. Eleanor Patterson, she paused dramatically. She disappeared shortly after the trial. Some say she fled to Canada with the children. Others believe something more tragic occurred. Sarah felt a chill. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had hidden in her hand during that march. 1914. Portrait suddenly seemed far more significant than a simple family. Memento.Sarah's research took her to the National Archives branch in Boston, where federal court records from 1914-1915 were housed. The Patterson case file was surprisingly thick, containing investigation reports, witness statements, and evidence documentation. The case against Thomas Patterson revealed a complex web of customs fraud spanning 3 years. He had been systematically underreporting the value of imported textiles, avoiding thousands of dollars in federal tariffs. The scheme involved forged documentation and bribery of port officials, but as Sarah read deeper into the investigative reports, she discovered something unexpected. Federal agents had suspected Eleanor Patterson of being more than an innocent bystander. A Treasury Department memorandum dated March 8, 1914 stated, "Evidence suggests Mrs. Eleanor Patterson maintained separate financial records and correspondence related to the import scheme. Recommend immediate search of family residence." The search had been scheduled for March 16, 1914, one day after the family portrait. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized the timing. Eleanor Patterson had known federal agents were coming to search their home. The family portrait on March 15th wasn't just a formal family photograph. It was taken on the last day of their life as they knew it. In the evidence inventory from the March 16th search, Sarah found a crucial detail. Searched premises thoroughly. No additional documentation recovered. Subject may have destroyed or concealed relevant materials prior to search. The picture was becoming clearer. Eleanor Patterson had hidden something in her hand during the portrait, possibly evidence she couldn't bear to destroy but dared not leave in the house. The photograph itself might have been her way of preserving proof of whatever she was protecting. A folder marked unrecovered evidence caught Sarah's attention. Inside, she found a handwritten note from the lead investigator. Mrs. Patterson claimed ignorance of her husband's activities, but witness reports suggest she was present during several suspicious meetings with foreign contacts. Her knowledge of the family's financial affairs appears extensive. Sarah photographed every relevant document, her mind racing with possibilities about what Eleanor Patterson had concealed that March afternoon in 1914 court. Transcripts from Thomas Patterson's 1915 trial provided Sarah with a disturbing picture of the family's final months. Eleanor Patterson had testified briefly on her husband's behalf, maintaining her innocence and claiming no knowledge of the customs fraud. But more intriguing were the witness statements Sarah found buried in the case files. Margaret Donnelly, the Patterson family's former housekeeper, had provided testimony that was never used in court. Mrs. Patterson was always writing letters, especially to people overseas. She kept a special writing box that she locked and hid. In the weeks before Mr. Patterson's arrest, she burned many papers in the fireplace. Another witness, a neighbor named Robert Sinclair, had observed strange behavior. The night before their portrait sitting, I saw Mrs. Patterson in her garden very late, near midnight. She appeared to be burying something beneath the rose bushes. The most chilling testimony came from Catherine Patterson's schoolteacher, Miss Helen Rogers. After Mr. Patterson's arrest, Eleanor came to collect Catherine from school. She seemed distraught and kept saying, "I have to protect what matters most." That was the last time anyone at the school saw either mother or daughter. Sarah's research into Eleanor's disappearance revealed that she and the children had simply vanished in April 1915, shortly after Thomas's conviction. Police reports indicated they had left their Beacon Street home with only personal belongings, leaving no forwarding address. William Patterson, the 8-year-old son, had been enrolled briefly in a school in Burlington, Vermont, in May 1915, but records showed the family left there after only 2 weeks. After that, the trail went completely cold. The Boston Police Department had conducted a missing persons investigation, but it was concluded that Eleanor had likely fled to avoid the scandal and potential charges of her own. No evidence of foul play was found. As Sarah read the final police report, dated December 1915, one line stood out. Mrs. Patterson's disappearance appears voluntary. However, her knowledge of her husband's criminal activities and possible possession of undiscovered evidence makes her a person of continued interest to federal authorities. Whatever Eleanor Patterson had hidden in her hand that day in 1914, it had been important enough to risk everything to protect. Sarah's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching Eleanor Patterson's disappearance, she had posted inquiries on several genealogy websites. 3 days after her Boston Archives visit, she received an email from a woman named Ruth Caldwell in Burlington, Vermont. "I believe my grandmother may have been Catherine Patterson," the email read. Well, she always claimed her real name was Catherine, but she went by Carol Caldwell her entire adult life. She died in 1995, but she left behind some items that might interest you, including what she called her mother's secret. Sarah immediately called Ruth, her hands shaking as she dialed. Ruth was a retired teacher in her 70s, the granddaughter of the little girl from the 1914 photograph. Grandmother rarely spoke about her early childhood, Ruth explained during their phone conversation. She said her father had been involved in some kind of trouble and that her mother had saved important papers. She kept a small metal box her entire life, claiming it contained proof of the truth. Ruth agreed to meet Sarah the following day in Burlington. That evening, Sarah could barely sleep, wondering what Eleanor Patterson's secret might reveal after more than a century. The next morning, in Ruth's cozy Burlington home, Sarah finally saw Catherine Patterson's legacy. The metal box was small, about the size of a jewelry box, with initials EP engraved on the lid, Eleanor Patterson. Inside, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth, were several items: a letter addressed to Catherine, a small photograph, and 3 folded documents that appeared to be official papers. "Grandmother made me promise to keep these safe," Ruth said softly. She said someday someone would come looking for the truth about what really happened to her family. She always maintained that her mother was innocent and that her father had been protecting someone else. Sarah's hands trembled as she carefully unfolded the letter Eleanor had written to her daughter. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried, and the date was March 15th, 1914, the same day as the family portrait. "My dearest Catherine," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come to light." With Ruth's permission, Sarah carefully read Eleanor Patterson's letter aloud, both women hanging on every word from the past. "My dearest Catherine, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. Your father is not the criminal the government believes him to be. The real perpetrator of the customs fraud is his business partner, Jonathan Harwick, who has been using your father's name and forged his signature on documents for over 2 years. I have proof of Jonathan's guilt, correspondence between him and corrupt port officials, forged copies of your father's signature, and financial records showing payments made from accounts your father never knew existed. Jonathan threatened our family when your father began questioning discrepancies in the business. He said if we exposed him, he would ensure your father was convicted of crimes that could result in prison or even deportation. Today we sat for what may be our final family portrait. Hidden in my hand was the key to a safety deposit box at the First National Bank of Boston, box number 247. Inside that box is all the evidence needed to prove your father's innocence and Jonathan's guilt. I could not risk keeping these documents in our home, knowing federal agents would search it. If something happens to your father and me, you must retrieve this evidence when you're old enough. The bank manager, Mr. Charles Whitman, is a family friend who knows the truth. He will help you when the time comes. Your father chose to protect our family's safety rather than fight charges he knew were false. He believed that by accepting blame, he could keep us all safe from Jonathan's threats. But I cannot let an innocent man's reputation be destroyed forever. Remember, my darling Catherine, that courage sometimes means protecting the truth until the right moment comes to reveal it. Your father is a good man who made a terrible choice out of love for his family. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she finished reading. The hidden key in Eleanor's hand hadn't been evidence of guilt. It was proof of innocence, carefully preserved through more than a century. Ruth wiped her eyes. Grandmother always said her mother was brave. She kept this letter her entire life, waiting for someone who would care enough to uncover the truth. The next morning, Sarah and Ruth drove to Boston together, the metal box and Eleanor's letter carefully secured in Sarah's briefcase. The First National Bank of Boston had been acquired by a larger institution in the 1960s, but corporate records indicated that safety deposit boxes from the original bank had been transferred to the main branch downtown. Bank manager Jennifer Walsh listened intently as Sarah explained the historical significance of their request. While safety deposit box 247 had been sealed for over a century due to non-payment of fees, the bank's legal department confirmed that Catherine Patterson's daughter, as Eleanor's next of kin, had the right to access its contents. This is highly unusual, Walsh admitted, but given the historical nature and the proper documentation, we can proceed. In the bank's vault, safety deposit box 247 sat in a row of similarly abandoned boxes. When Walsh inserted the key Eleanor had hidden in her hand that day in 1914, it turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside the box were the documents Eleanor had described: detailed correspondence between Jonathan Harwick and corrupt port officials, bank records showing bribes, and most damning of all, practice sheets where Harwick had perfected forging Thomas Patterson's signature. There was also a letter from Harwick to Eleanor, dated March 5th, 1914, that made the threat explicit. If your husband continues asking questions about the import documentation, I will ensure he takes responsibility for irregularities he knows nothing about. Your family's reputation and safety depend on his cooperation. Ruth held one of the documents, her grandmother's Vindication finally complete. She was right all along. Her mother really was protecting the truth. Sarah photographed every document, her mind already working on how to present this historical revelation. Thomas Patterson had been innocent, taking blame to protect his family from a dangerous man's threats. Eleanor Patterson hadn't been an accomplice. She had been a mother trying to preserve proof of her husband's innocence for future generations. The safety deposit box contained one final item. Another photograph, this one showing Thomas Patterson and Jonathan Harwick at the textile business, both men smiling and shaking hands, a bitter irony given the betrayal that followed. 6 months after discovering Eleanor Patterson's secret, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the Massachusetts Historical Society, presenting her findings to historians, genealogists, and members of the Patterson family who had emerged after publicity about the discovery. The evidence from safety deposit box 247 had been examined by forensic document experts, who confirmed the authenticity of the papers and the forged signatures. The story had captured national attention, becoming a symbol of how historical injustices could finally be corrected. Through careful preservation and dedicated research, Thomas Patterson's conviction was officially acknowledged as a miscarriage of justice by the federal court system, though no formal exoneration was possible due to the passage of time. More importantly, the Patterson family name had been cleared in the historical record. Ruth Caldwell had donated Eleanor's letter and the safety deposit box contents to the Massachusetts Historical Society, ensuring that future researchers would have access to this remarkable story of courage and preservation of truth. Dr. James Reed had traced the fate of Jonathan Harwick, discovering that he had fled to South America in 1916, shortly after Thomas Patterson's conviction, strongly supporting Eleanor's version of events. As Sarah concluded her presentation, she displayed the original 1914 photograph alongside Eleanor's letter. This case reminds us that photographs are more than mere images. They are frozen moments containing stories waiting to be discovered. Eleanor Patterson's hidden key wasn't just a secret. It was a mother's determination to preserve truth for future generations. In the audience, Ruth Caldwell smiled through tears, finally seeing her grandmother's lifelong faith in her mother's story validated. The little girl in the 1914 photograph had grown up carrying her mother's secret, and now, more than a century later, that secret had restored her family's honor. The 1914 studio photograph, once a simple portrait of a prosperous Boston family, had become a testament to the power of maternal love, the importance of preserving truth, and the reminder that sometimes the most significant secrets are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to change history. Itself, Eleanor Patterson's courage in hiding that key in her hand during their final family portrait had ultimately achieved exactly